normally a copywriter's like, no, you can't tell me a computer can't tell me what to do. I'm an artist.
Hello and welcome to episode 61 of Rockstar CMO FM. The M is for marketing and the F is for, well, you decide. As you're probably wondering, does the world need another effing marketing podcast? I'm your host, Ian Truscott, and this podcast serves as my excuse to chat with marketing friends, old and new, that I've met through my career, leading marketing teams and as a trusted client advisor, and hopefully share some marketing street knowledge that will bring out the rockstar in you. Come say hello. You can find this podcast at Rockstar CMO on Twitter and LinkedIn. This episode was recorded on Friday the 7th of April, and wherever you are, I hope you've had a good week and you are well, safe, and staying as sane as you feel you need to be. In today's episode, One to Watch, One Hit Wonder or Wonderwall returns. I chat to Margot Bloomstein, a leading voice in content strategy, about her new book, Trustworthy, How the Smartest Brands Beat Cynicism and Bridge the Trust Gap. And of course, I complete the week in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar with Robert Rose for a chat and a cocktail. Right, let's get started, shall we? On to our first segment, where we discuss a marketing technique or trend and decide if it's a one to watch, a one-hit wonder, or Wonderwall. As you might have heard last week, my regular co-host Jeff Clark has taken the week off, and I'm delighted that our guest from episode 53, David Maguire, creative director and co-owner of Radix Communications, has taken his virtual chair. Let's find out what's hot or not this week. Welcome, David, to hang on, let me get this right. To One to Watch, One Hit Wonder or Wonderwall slot, vacated by Jeff Clark this week.
There's big shoes to fill. I'm slightly nervous. Yes, I'm here. I'm checking my back. I've got 12 on my back. I'm here as the substitute.
You're on super sub. And also we're inspired by Irene Naircorn-Kane, who is a friend of the show, our listener. I don't want to say plural because I don't want to assume,
Wow, check your podcast out with a listener and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
I just put mine in the ether. Nobody.
And Irene's brilliant because she's often making comments on LinkedIn and suggesting things for us to talk about. And one of the things she suggested is that we tackle the topic of copy that's written by artificial intelligence. And as I normally hand over to Jeff, the grenade of the topic over to him, I say, what say you? So what say you, David?
Well, it's easy for me to say, a computer will never be able to write as well as I can, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and that's what every profession that's had their job taken over by AI said immediately before it happened. Okay.
Yeah.
And the truth is that it's a thing that's coming. They get, they're pouring money into it, resource into it, and they're getting better and better at it. Mm-hmm. And there are some areas now where AI written copy outperforms human written copy.
Really?
Yeah. So not for long form stuff, but mm-hmm. I spoke to Parry Malm, who's the CEO at Phrasey, mm-hmm. And he was telling me about this. But there are certain fast food companies that you've probably heard of whose email subject lines now on their direct mail are written by computer.
Wow.
And what will happen is now they claim that their email subject lines, the computer written ones, will outperform a human written one 8 out of 10 times, and the computer can tell you which is the other two.
Wow.
So it is coming, but I think there are a couple of ways that people are viewing it. So there is the big question about, will computers replace people and when? And that's a tricky thing. And I think, certainly for kind of the content that I work in, there are certain aspects that writers won't have to do for very much longer.
Yeah.
But I think that's a long way off. But then the other stuff that's clever is about how you use AI as a tool within copywriting.
Right.
And that's something where, in some ways, it's not here straight away. It's probably not there right now, but that's something that that really is pretty promising.
Yeah. So augmented copy, AI augmented copy.
Yeah. So when you talk to people in the AI writing sector, the example that people would say is, if you think about the way that now an architect would use CAD, where they used to do everything by hand, or where a designer would use Photoshop or something like that.
Yeah.
Where a lot of the repetitive kind of grunt work gets picked up by the computer. What they talk about is people using AI as that kind of assistance, so that then the human's doing the bit the human is really good at, which is, again, I think what people talk about in every area where they bring in an element of AI, right? I mean, there's a platform called, I think, Acrolinks, where they use the AI instead of doing the writing. If I've understood it right, they use the AI as almost like the brand manager.
Oh, wow.
So they use the AI to check that the writing, from the document governance standpoint. So to check that it's in keeping with with the brand values and the voice and tone and all of these kinds of things, and they kind of get the AI to run a pass over it that way. And that's something I could see happening quite
so like a Grammarly for editorial guidelines.
Yeah, pretty much. And in some senses, Grammarly kind of does that already. Like when you look at the premium version of Grammarly, you've got do you want the super formal version? Do you want the kind of businessy version? Do you want the super informal version? And you can begin to tune Grammarly to voice and tone already. And it's something that I've got to say I was really surprised by. But earlier this year, we did a trial within Radix. So at Radix, we have a dozen copywriters all working on B2B content. And it was suggested within the team, that maybe having Grammarly run a second eye, if you like, to assist the reviewing of that content, because everything that we write gets reviewed by another writer. But to assist in that process. And so they, a number of team members volunteered to do a trial. And I normally a copywriter's like, no, you can't tell me a computer can't tell me what to do. I'm an artist. And actually the thing that really surprised me, they came back and went, do you know what? Some of the things that Grammarly does is really annoying. But if you tweak the settings and turn those things off, it's really, really useful.
Where are you on Oxford commas? I mean, that's what Grammarly does to me. It makes me use Oxford commas.
Well, I knew I liked Grammarly for a reason. I'm pro. Generally speaking, I am Oxford comma and N dash. Where unless I'm writing American, in which case I'm M dash. But interestingly, it's one of the things where I have the lovely job of hosting the National Copywriting Conference. And a couple of years ago, back when it was all in person, we were in the Crystal in Docklands, and right at the end of the day, Doug Kessler, Doug? Doug Kessler stood up.
I don't know him. I know of him. Yeah, I can't claim to know him.
Oh, you should meet Doug. Doug's awesome. But Doug Kessler from Velocity Partners, he was like one of our keynote speakers. And at the end of the day, he stood up and went, right, let's settle this once and for all. Who's pro Oxford comma? and you had hundreds of copywriters from all over the UK doing a show of hands on the Oxford comma. And they were 2/3 in favour, 1/3 against.
Wow. Was there a fight? Splurs.
Imagine all these copywriting nerds in the car park afterwards with flip
Their pencils,
broken bottles.
I think maybe biros.
Cordial.
Broken biros. so your experience with Grammarly is that you could tune it, and it is getting that way, that it's a writer's assistant. Is that where we're saying that the AI is in terms of copy? Like it's an assistant.
I think so, and I think that's where it will. That's where most of the AI empowered tech platforms, whether it's real AI, machine learning, or whether it's a thing that they put the name AI on. But that's where most of that writing tech seems to be closest to having a real impact. So, funny enough, there was a discussion on Twitter among copywriters just the other day, and and someone had been through sort of all of them, with an open mind, kind of going, what will help me? And their findings were, some of this stuff's pretty helpful, but it's still really clunky.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about Grammarly. Like, some of the things it does are really helpful and really useful. Yeah. And then a lot of the time it's really annoying. So I can't work with Grammarly on. I have to turn Grammarly off, do my writing, and then turn Grammarly on and have it. And then
I must admit that's
consider all of the things.
Yeah, that's how I tend to work anyway with edits. But certainly with Grammarly is to write raw and then try and then work with it afterwards. Well, so have you tried any of those tools where you can put in an idea or a sentence or something like that and it creates a whole article? Have you tried any of those things?
I haven't, no. I mean, I've seen articles that are, I've seen news articles now that are computer written, and, like football reports and stuff. And they're fine. Yeah. But I'd hate to get to this situation where you've got a writer who's got a computer writing all the copy, and you've got a computer reading all the copy. But I think that I haven't seen any of those yet where they're able to really do anything long form that's really going to grip a reader.
I mean that's sort of coming, isn't it? But I like the analogy that you were sort of making earlier on, which is that the grunt work will be taken away, and right now that grunt work is fairly low level. That sort of Grammarly author assistant writing subject matter lines. Also, the Lately product. I chatted to a chap from there last week where it can derive tweets and social posting out of an article, bit like your email subject line example. So they're starting to do some of the periphery kind of boring bits around actually writing the article, and can help us improve our editorial, right, from a branding perspective and from a Grammarly, whatever you would call that perspective. But do you think then that the future is going to be that we're more the designers, like if you look at the way that cars are made, for example, that the humans do the design and then the factory goes off and makes the thing? Do you think we're going to get into that situation? Maybe
eventually. I think there's a couple of things about this. So one of them is, I think over time, the AI will do more and more stuff, and it is that sort of thing where I think copywriters have to move up the value chain, like that. That's the thing where more and more experienced, writers need to be more, both from their point of view and it's helpful from the marketer's point of view to have a copywriter that's because a computer's not going to ask you, why does your audience care about this?
Perfect.
They're not going to push back and say, oh, it's got a triple widget flange. Well, okay, so what? And a lot of my job is finding really polite ways to ask, so what? Who cares?
For sure.
Because as the writer, my sort of privilege outside is to kind of be the avatar for the audience, to be the avatar for the reader, and to make sure that I'm in a position where, based upon the brief, I can say something to the reader, to the audience, the decision maker, that they're going to understand and that they're going to care about.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means I have to ask some pretty big, dumb questions.
Yeah.
And knowing when to ask that and when not to ask that, is something that I don't think a computer can do.
No, I like that, because I think we've talked about B2B copy in the past, and you could almost you could envision a situation where an AI bot looks at the 3 websites of your competitors and then spins you out a website copy that pretty much fits into your category, but would do none of those things that you just you can't see David's face, but you see David's face. But you see what I mean? And that's the difference, isn't it? Is that differentiation is the human touch, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, Ian. So many B2B websites look like they are an average of everything else in their sector, right? Like they kind of went, and I'm not even saying actually they kind of went often.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the marketer, but the stakeholders will go, see this one, see that one, do something that looks like it's kind of in between these two.
Yeah.
And that's why everything in a sector, or everything in a certain vertical, there are often very few outliers. They all seem to kind of coalesce to the same kind of message and the same kind of language, whether it makes any sense to the audience or
I can't remember.
Not. I can imagine B2B would really love that kind of robot.
I can't remember if it was in a conversation we had on the podcast or whether it's a conversation we had outside, but I think that I mentioned that I actually in one gig I cut and pasted just the copy, not the branding, of the 3 main messages on the homepage of like the vendor I was with and 2 of our main competitors. And I asked some of the executives to identify which one was ours. And they couldn't, and that sort of tells you everything. Then, right
I'm
there, right?
Do that to a client one day. One day I'm going to be brave enough to do that to a client.
So I think it sounds like we as humans need to avoid writing like robots as much as anything else.
Well, you like to think that that's the progress. That's what B2B as a market is progressing away from. The fact that it's not just a business saying generic business things, but it's actually talking to people about what they care about, and talking to people about the stuff that actually matters, and communicating human to human, because a business doesn't read your stuff. A person in a business reads your stuff.
Absolutely.
But something that something that AI could do well. Mm-hmm. Eventually is ABM, I think, where one of the things that my team does is we'll get we'll work on an ABM campaign where there's a hero, there are a set of hero assets, there's a landing page with various pieces of curated content, and then there'll be the list of accounts that they want it to go out for, and then that and we'll have the information on what's important to this account, and which of the of these 10 assets, which 3 are we could draw their attention to, and that kind of thing. But those parameters are quite well set. Here's the vanilla version of the hero asset that needs to be customized a little bit to to fit more of this message, more of that message, more of the other message, and it could be something where there's a bit more automation in that, so that the human is doing the thinking about what does the person in this account care about, and then the computer is customizing. They're definitely not there yet. They can't do that yet.
Right.
But that would be something that's possible. One of the things that worries me about it is, and it's a gap, it's a thing that's coming up in other industries where AI is taking over to a greater extent, which is the simple stuff that AI takes over is the stuff where you train tomorrow's experts.
Yes.
Tomorrow's brilliant copywriter learns by adapting this message to suit that set of pain points, by the muscle memory of let's look at this. How do we summarize this in two lines? How do we do the subject line? And it's thing that's much more widespread. There are other industries where there are basically now no training opportunities.
Yeah.
Because you have to invent stuff for people to do rather than giving them the simple stuff so they progress on to the other stuff. And, there aren't enough B2B copywriters as it is. And it takes us, takes a long time to train it takes us 5 or 6 years to train a really good B2B copywriter. And, one of the things that worries me is, will we lose those opportunities when a computer's doing that? How will someone learn how to do the job?
Yeah. No, that's all lots of very good points. I should have expected that absolutely from you, David, sitting in this slot. So, and maybe Jeff is going to have big shoes to fill next week. So basically, you're saying that yes, this is coming, but copywriters need to beware and up their game and write like humans and not like robots. So, what are we saying? Are we saying this is a one to watch, one hit wonder, or Wonderwall?
Well, I don't think the listener will be surprised from what I've said. I think it's coming, and I don't think it's there yet. You know, so I think it's one to watch.
Yeah, excellent. And do you have a song recommendation for us?
Yeah, so one to watch. So I kind of figured that would be a song that was sort of under the radar. Something that people probably won't have heard before. And as we're recording this in, the week of May the 4th and Star Wars Day, and we're talking about robots writing stuff, robots at work. I thought about maybe the Droids by Sensation Smith, who's something that people, is a really independent artist people won't have heard before. But if people kind of like Graham Coxon or some of the wit of like a Divine Comedy or something, then people might enjoy it.
All right. Well, I'll play a little sample of that as we play out. Thank you very much, David. And I'll include a link to it in the show notes if people want to seek out Sensation Smith and the Droids. And thank you very much for filling in this week, David. I look forward to speaking to you soon, David. Thank you.
You're a drone, you're a clone, and you're not in the zone. Knocked off, clocked off, and scared of your boss. We are the droids you're looking for. We are the droids you're looking for.
Thank you, David. And there you have it. Copy written by the bots is one to watch. And that was The Droids by Sensation Smith. And thank you, friend of the show, Irene Nearcombe-Kane, Director of Marketing at ExactTag, for suggesting the topic on LinkedIn. And you can find David also on LinkedIn, Twitter, and at Radix Communications. And I'll include all his links in the show notes. Right. On to this week's guest. If you're into content marketing or strategy, then you will know, or maybe you should know, Margot Bloomstein. She's an internationally acclaimed speaker, author, and one of the most prominent voices in the content strategy industry. She's the author of Content Strategy at Work and the principal of Appropriate Inc., a brand and content strategy consultancy based in Boston. For more than 20 years, Margot has led workshops, keynoted conferences, and advised marketing teams around the world. I really hope you enjoy this conversation. Hello, Margot. Welcome to Rockstar CMO FM. How are you?
Thank you so much. I am great. Excited to be talking with you today.
Oh, I'm the excited one. I've been following you on Twitter for years. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much. Now, I've already read out your bio in the preamble for this, but for the listeners that don't know you, and I should imagine lots of people do, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been working in content strategy for about a little more than 20 years now, 21 years. And over that time, I feel like I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of really amazing brands across a wide variety of industries and see how our industry has evolved and hopefully helped some of that evolution in content strategy as content marketing kind of developed as well. And as we've grown up within and beside design and user experience design and really centered our users and brands more in that process. And I'm very, very grateful for those opportunities, for so many good conversations with great clients and amazing collaborators.
Yeah. I think before I pressed record, we think we may have met each other, but maybe not. But I've definitely been following you for a long time, and I love your company name, Appropriate Inc. That's fantastic. How did you come up with that?
Yeah, I love a good double entendre.
Yeah.
So I think as I was sort of coming up in the industry and focusing more and more on brand-driven content strategy, as I said, I kind of started out about 20-ish years ago at Sapient in their office in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was hired into a team of content strategists using the term content strategy. Wow. Yeah. So when folks say, is it fairly new? I feel like, geologically speaking, it is new, but in the history of the web industry, not at all. And frankly, in the history of kind of marketing, I think that many of the tenets of content strategy around how we craft a message and curate that message to better meet the needs of both the speaker, the brand maybe, and the audience. Some of those trends and techniques are not new either. The technology certainly is. Mm-hmm. That is constantly evolving, as it should be. Mm-hmm. But I think our responses to what really matters in it and what is most important in it, and frankly, the driving forces within our industry, those things are not necessarily new. But so I was at Sapient for a couple of years, was in-house at Timberland, the footwear and apparel company, for about a year, and then joined a series of mid-sized marketing and web design and development agencies to start their content strategy practices. And over that time, over about a decade or so, I think my thinking was evolving alongside the perspectives in our industry where, around the late 90s, kind of around the time of the .com boom and bust, that was really when the web was first gaining ground as kind of the new platform for brochureware, where so many companies were saying, this is who we are, this is all we have to say, so let's throw that up on a website now. And then user-centered design started to creep into our thinking and into our processes, and user research, and really considering the needs of our users and our audiences, considering their baggage and their perspectives and their journeys and pathways to our organizations and beyond our organizations. And that kind of thinking kind of pulled the pendulum in the other direction, away from just the idea of brochureware to now saying, well, let's make things that are built entirely around not the needs of our brands, but the needs of our audiences. Yeah. I think that is a good thing, but not an ideal thing either, because if you take that mindset, that approach within an industry, by all given rights, every organization that is targeting the same audience with the same product, like let's say airlines that all serve the same routes at about the same price points, well, then naturally shouldn't their means of engagement online, their messaging, the way they present themselves visually and verbally, shouldn't that all be the same too? It shouldn't, because then we're not serving our brands nor our users. No, exactly.
And I think your example there with airlines, we're going to break into the meat of it if we're not careful and pass the introductions. But I think your example there with airlines is many of us are in tribes, aren't we, around the airlines that we like, and we identify with their values in a different way. And that's the story we need to tell with our content strategy, isn't it? Is what's going to resonate with my tribe. They look to be different to the other tribe that use the other airline. Who are these people and how do we talk to them, right? To your point about understanding the audience.
Right. And also, how do we help those people realize, hey, this is here is a brand that resonates with my interests. How do we put out that flag that says, this is who we are, this is how we are, so that other people can find us, whether that is potential customers or potential employees, to say, that resonates with me. You're just like me. That's the airline for me. That's the airline that I identify with, or the grocer, or the footwear brand that is right for me. So I think branding and differentiation around brand-driven content strategy, that of course serves our organizations, but it also serves our audiences. And I think, to get to your original question, why appropriating? I am getting there, really. That's because so much of the discussions that I was having with designers and developers and writers at the time was around figuring out what is not just right, not just what we like in terms of color scheme or language, or even the platforms and channels through which we engage our audiences, but what is most appropriate for serving their needs and meeting the communication goals of our organizational message architecture. So kind of after 10 years or so of having those conversations, that's when I went out on my own and incorporated as appropriating.
That's fantastic. I'm going to move on to probably the primary reason why we're chatting, because you're a second-time author with all this experience that you have, and you've just published Trustworthy: How the Smartest Brands Beat Cynicism and Bridge the Trust Gap. And we're always talking about trust on this podcast. And I think that relates to what you're talking about, being appropriate to your audience. What inspired you to write this book?
I think about 5-6 years ago, I was looking at what was going on in the political arena, first in the US, but then certainly there in the UK as well, and across Europe, and seeing how cynicism was destabilizing so many of our conversations in the political realm, where people were walling themselves off to new information, saying that, well, all politicians lie. You can't trust what anybody says. And falling prey to really the behavior of cult leaders, saying, don't listen to anyone else. Only trust me, or only trust the media that also backs me up. Don't do your own research. Don't trust the evidence of your own eyes. We have a term for that. That's gaslighting. And I was seeing how gaslighting coupled with cynicism was affecting political conversation and persuasion. And I wondered if that would matter to my clients, because I don't really work too much in the political arena. Like, most of my clients are in retail and healthcare and some government services and software and a lot of consumer goods, that type of thing. And I wondered if those issues would affect them. Because when people wall themselves off from new information, they wall themselves off from expertise, and marketing is a form of expertise and authority. It's saying, I'm here, you're not, so let me tell you about this new product or this new service, or maybe how you can best help yourself here. And I wondered if it would matter to my audiences and my clients. And it turns out, it does. The issues of trust and cynicism are so important in whatever industry in which you operate. And if you don't pay attention to those things as a marketer, you will suffer from them. And I think that all of our efforts in marketing, all of our investments there, are a waste if we don't first look at how to empower our audiences, how to regain their trust, rebuild their confidence in both themselves and us. And we've talked about that on this podcast a few times in a couple of the episodes. And one of the things when I'm advising clients or in a marketing leadership position is I always talk about the three things that I think marketing needs to focus on. And I call it awareness, revenue, and trust. And because I think often that last one is forgotten, and you're not going to get the other two. You're not going to get revenue or awareness unless somebody starts to trust you, and they're not going to share your message unless they trust your message. They're not going to transact with you unless they trust you. It's an incredibly important job of marketing, isn't it, to drive trust? Right. And I think even before that, they won't take the time to pay attention to you unless they are able to approach your organization from the position of confidence of saying, all right, let me hear something more. Not, I have all the answers, I don't need more information, but tell me more about your company or your products or why I should switch to your brand.
Yeah. No, I like that. And in the book, you split trust into the way that we need to gain trust into three things: voice, volume, and vulnerability. And I think they're all, your book is packed with case studies as well that are brilliant. And I'll ask you about those in a moment. But tell us about those three things and why those three things were the top of mind for you for this particular book.
Well, I think as I was seeing this problem around trust and cynicism and how so much marketing was falling flat and sales cycles were taking longer, and that wasn't just the fault of the pandemic, I saw this problem and I was trying to find more information about it. And every other book that I could find out there didn't really dig into, well, what do we do about it? As marketers, can we do anything about this? And it turns out we can. And as you mentioned with those case studies, as I was interviewing organizations that had been successful and are successful at cultivating and sustaining trust, it isn't because they don't make mistakes, and it certainly isn't because they just kind of keep their heads down and don't share, don't engage on social issues or something like that. What they do right falls into a three-part framework. They maintain a consistent and familiar voice visually and verbally through all their touch points. They do that by investing in good governance models that go beyond just editorial style guidelines, but also get into design systems and a contributory model around design systems. And I have some thoughts on that. Also, they invest in offering the right volume of content. By volume, I don't mean the loudness of it, but rather how much they say, the length and level of detail in product descriptions and blog posts, as well as in imagery. Like, do they create really detailed diagrams to explain their products, or have really rich image galleries for every product and event? Or are they able to convey things more simply in a different kind of visual style? And I looked at examples from both ends of the spectrum there to see what works for most brands in terms of fostering confidence and empowering their audiences to make good decisions in which they do have confidence. And then the third section of the book focuses on vulnerability. So how brands can embrace risk to bring their audiences closer, to build greater loyalty, whether they are sharing more, making their values visible and engaging around social issues, or if they are instead vulnerable because they're stumbling back from a really stupid mistake, or I don't know, the CEO has said or done something horrible, or they need to address something that is very real and very horrible about the company itself. I look at, well, what works? How do brands develop trust even through those really
I really enjoyed that section of the book. And I think that it talks about because a lot of marketers and brands are tossing around the term authenticity a lot, aren't they? And I felt that some of the points you made in that section in particular were about how to be like your whole self as a brand, almost as an organization, right? In how you're communicating through your content, and to be honest sometimes about making those mistakes. So I thought that was, I mean, the whole book is excellent, but I felt that vulnerability thing was a real differentiator, really, in terms of the way that brands need to look at how they're messaging. They probably shy away from that a little bit,
right? Because, I mean, as you said, so many organizations, so many brands fling around terms. We fling around terms like authenticity and transparency, like confetti. But confetti doesn't build brands. Confetti doesn't build trust. Hard work does. And I think we can operationalize vulnerability by looking at how do we engage with greater transparency? What does it mean to be authentic in our communication, and narrow the gap between our words and mission statements and whatnot and our actions. And that is tough for many organizations, especially right now, if they want to wade into issues around Me Too or Black Lives Matter or so many other social issues. it is hard work, but it is important work, especially if they want to bring their audience.
Yeah, especially as there's such a risk with some of the brands that have been exposed as, you know, you put whatever you like in front of the word washing, right? Greenwashing, washing, whatever it is. And you really need to be, you really, like you say, put in the work with something like that. You can't just tell a story. You need to be walking the walk with a lot of those issues, don't you?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think there are definitely brands that are doing it well, even as they make mistakes, maybe because they first make mistakes, but it doesn't stop them from engaging around those issues. And I think it is important for organizations to realize that it isn't just a nice thing to do or maybe a savvy thing to do to engage around different social issues. It's also good business because if they do hope to connect with an audience and engage in a community, then they cannot hold themselves separate from the issues that affect that community or audience. Yeah.
I think there's some of the challenge there. And it's a bit like what we were saying at the beginning, where you're identifying your tribe. And sometimes identifying your tribe means that some people are going to disagree with you, right? They're just not your kind of people. And I think that's sometimes a challenge that brands have, isn't it? That if you're going, or if you differentiate yourself in any kind of way, in order to be different, you're not like others. And therefore there will be people that don't like what you've done. And it's having that, doing that in a considered way, right, and be ready for that. I think is that a challenge your clients have? Is
to kind of be considered about the social issues.
Yeah, well, really to really embrace that differentiation and to go out a little bit on a limb from the usual blah 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 that's said in their industry and identify themselves as different, either through social issues or with differentiating their stories, or by being vulnerable, or some of the other things you talk about in the book.
I think for so many organizations, they are grounded in industries that do face struggles around, or I shouldn't say that hides it in the passive voice. Yeah. They are embroiled in industries that perpetuate certain problems. It isn't they are embroiled in them. They perpetuate those problems. And I think smart organizations are able to wrangle with those issues in a realistic and mature way. Yeah. And that means rather than hiding away from them or pretending that the issues that are external to the company don't also affect the company, but by acknowledging problems and saying, this is a problem in the world, it is a problem here too, here's what we're going to do about it. And I think that we can look back over the past 20 years and find some good examples of that. I think it was in around 2000, 2001, where Adidas published the first corporate social responsibility report in the footwear industry to say that we are in an industry that doesn't do right by the environment, that doesn't always do right by how we use labor around the world and in global labor relations. We don't always do right. Here is what our organization doesn't do right, and here's how we're going to start to try to be better. Yeah. Now, publishing that report is an investment in transparency. Doing the work to improve things is an investment in authenticity. And publishing that report almost 20 years ago, that did not fix all the problems in their company or in the industry, but it put a stake in the ground to say, this is a problem that we see. Everybody else does too. Let's start talking about it and let's start working on it. Yeah. And it caused many of their competitors to look to them as an example and to also say, we need to change things too. Yeah, and bit by bit, that's an industry that has been improving. Yeah. And then you identify yourself as a leader, don't you? And also, I mean, I'd love to talk to you. I've just realized the time, but I mean, this is absolutely fascinating. And, because it's about the contribution to the culture that we make as marketers, isn't it? And some of the changes that we can do. And by embracing some of these things, we contribute to the culture. And I think that's a fascinating topic. But I'm going to have to get to the last question, which is we have a regular feature on Rockstar CMO, which we call the swimming pool, our portal to marketing hell for all the bullshit, snake oil and overhyped trends. And like many rock stars, we like chucking things in there. What would you chuck in our Rockstar CMO swimming pool? I'm going to call out a few things that I think are points in a bigger trend, if I might. Yes, you may. Maybe becomes a wave in that swimming pool. And that would be, I think, within marketing and within kind of our broader industry.
Yeah.
We clamor on and cling on to new technologies and new platforms, whether it is headless CMS or design systems. We cling on to these things and say, this will be what makes our organization communicate more consistently.
Yeah.
This will be the thing that saves our marketing.
Yeah.
And I despise that approach because I think that those technologies, those techniques, those platforms are wonderful. But we've never had a problem with technology. We've never had a problem with hardware. When our work deals with content, our problems are people problems. Our problems are cultural. And a new CMS does not fix a broken publishing culture.
Yeah.
A new design system does not fix problems of consistency and cohesion within your publishing culture. So I think, my problem is with the thrall to technology that forgets that it's people that make content. It's people that use the technology. If you work with content, you need to work with the people around the content.
That's
my problem.
That is so good. I'm trying to restrain myself from laughing through your response there because absolutely. And so many times we have great marketers on the show and they say the same thing, that technology is not going to solve anything. It's a people process thing that you need to get figured out, and technology can enable that, but it isn't the answer to the question. That's fantastic. Thank you, Margot. So we've gone a little bit over time as well. A fascinating conversation. Thank you. And I absolutely recommend your book. I really enjoyed reading it. Thank you very much. Where can people, I know where I found it. Where can folks find your book? It's on Amazon and all the other good places, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you can find Trustworthy everywhere books are sold. And certainly the big behemoth that you just mentioned, I invite folks to go there, review it and whatnot, or find it from the local bookstore, the retailer near you, or through bookshop.org or IndieBound that'll connect you with a local bookstore to support as well, because that's where so many good conversations around content.
Yeah, bookshop.org. Yeah, somebody put me onto bookshop.org. That's a brilliant suggestion. So I'm going to say the title in full: Trustworthy, How the Smartest Brands Beat Cynicism and Bridge the Trust Gap by Margot Bloomstein. So go check that out. And for you, Margot, when people spin the dial on the interwebs, where might they find you?
You can find me on Twitter, usually at mbloomstein, as well as find me at appropriateinc.com/trustworthy.
Excellent. And I will include all the links to you, the book, which I very much enjoyed, in the show notes. Thank you very much, Margot.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you, Margot. Really enjoyed that conversation. And this idea of voice, volume, and vulnerability in building brand trust. I think we'll be dipping into her book in future episodes, and I hope she comes back. Let me know what you think. Right, it's that time of the week. It's Friday evening, and time to find out where my friend and content marketing guru, Robert Rose, would like to transport us to for a marketing thought and a cocktail in the Rockstar CMO virtual bar. Good evening, Robert. What are you drinking?
Oh, hello, my friend, and welcome to the bar. You've had some familiar guests on your show the last few weeks. It's the way you and I record this, I don't often get to hear the guests before they actually go live. So, this is, it's nice. It's been really good, but it's good to see you in the bar. What we're drinking tonight is, again, I'm going to assume that in your wonderful home of the UK that it's classically gray and cold. But it's been hot here. It's been really hot, and summertime has arrived early here in Southern California. And there is no drink that is more classic to Southern California than the classic traditional margarita. So that's what we have tonight to drink, is a classic homemade, margarita. that is, so the classic homemade margarita, you've got 2 parts lime juice, you've got 1 part lemon juice, and then I don't use real sugar because I don't appreciate headaches or hangovers, but or the weight gain. So I use birch sugar. So that's a special sort of, it's the kind of sugar that is actually good for diabetics and that sort of things.
All right.
Birch sugar is great for this. And so it's a good tablespoon of birch sugar in there to make your margarita mix. And then of course your favorite, Reposado tequila. Nice. And then whether you have a salt rim glass or a regular glass, that's up to you. But that's our classic margarita tonight.
Sounds it. And of course, for Cinco de Mayo this week, wasn't it?
That's right. Indeed, very good for you. Yes, indeed. Yeah. Cinco de Mayo was this week, and which a lot of people think it's the Independence Day. It's not the Independence Day of Mexico, but there you go.
Oh, right. We just think of it as Cinco de Mayo, and we kind of celebrate in our house from our time of living in the US. And I think we've talked about my enjoyment of Mexican food and Mexican beer. And so anyway, I'm going to pop some ice in a glass and then look upon my vast desktop bar to see how I can make such a fine drink. And I'm going to start with... some Bombay Sapphire Gin. That's a bit like
yes.
I think we've described, haven't we? So
yes, that you mix that with some Marg mix, and you have kind of a weird margarita, but nonetheless.
Yes, I don't have any Marg mix. I only have. I can't get this open. I only have.
Don't have any Marg mix.
I only have cucumber tonic water. Unfortunately, on my desk, so a little bit of that.
If you add, I'm going to assume that is a lime or some sort of citrus flavored tonic. No,
I could lie because this is the joy of radio. But
okay,
no, it's cucumber tonic water.
Yeah, that's not going to go well with a margarita. But yeah, go ahead.
No, so I'll give this a taste, Robert.
All right.
Very nice. What did you call it?
I call that a margarita is what I call that.
It's absolutely delicious. I could drink one of these every week.
I think you probably shall. Yeah.
And where are we going to be drinking these fine drinks?
Well, it's hot here in Southern California, but I think we have to, I mean, we're going to spend Cinco de Mayo here. My initial reaction is to say somewhere here in Southern California, but here's the thing. You can get good Mexican food here in California. You can, but you will not get better Tex-Mex or Mexican food than you will in Texas. So I think we need to take a trip to Texas for this. Yep. And so there are some amazing places in my hometown of Dallas, Texas. But rather than go to Dallas, I think we're going to head to Austin. And just outside of Austin, there are a few Tex-Mex places where we can go and have a good classic margarita. And chat about life.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
So, and I love Austin. I've been to Austin, so for a change, somewhere that I've been to too. And so we're having this lovely chat about life, and Austin's a wonderful town. And over the top of all the music that I'm sure that we'd be listening to there, what we'll be chatting about this week.
I think what's on my mind is something that I was talking about with my friend Joe on my podcast, which is, we've been doing this content thing and in marketing for, many of us for 2 decades, but certainly in earnest, let's call it for at least, 5 years, if not, going on 10 years. And the funny thing is I'm starting to notice, you ever read the classic book, Good to Great? by Jim Collins.
Yeah.
Fantastic, wonderful business book. And in that book, he talks a lot about the idea of going good to great and the time that it takes. And the interesting thing to me, what's on my mind as I've been thinking about this, is this idea of how long sometimes we have to be at something before it to be considered revolutionary change, right? So I'll give you an example of this, right? We think of the highway system, right? And, I'm not familiar with the highway system in the UK or Europe, but here in the US anyway, it really got started in the mid 50s. And when the highway system, which is largely considered this huge revolutionary change to the way that the economy was, powered in the US and all of that kind of stuff, you can track back and you can look at what really happened in the course of almost 10 years, 5 years to, hundreds, thousands of laws and failed projects and minimal efforts going all the way back to the 1900s. And it's the same with sort of the moonshot, right? The landing on the moon. Yeah. If you look at the big, huge, audacious goal of going to the moon, well, that wasn't just something that happened from 1960 to the late 1960s. That was something that was small, incremental, minimal changes that led up to that for 20, 30 years. And the lesson, I think, to get to the point, is sort of when we're trying to drive big change in our business, we often think about it in this sort of revolutionary thing, this breakthrough campaign or this big idea and this viral big bang thing that's going to happen. And the thought of this kind of change gets to be overwhelming. And, like we proclaim, hey, we're going to the moon. But we don't even right now have the concept of flight, much less, doing that. Right. Yes. And so the key is that if you look at successful content creators, media creators, the ones that are truly successful today, whether it's newspapers, magazines, TV shows, movies, novels, they don't think in that way. They don't think in that big bang viral one and done. They just produce hour by hour, day by day, week by week, creating the most valuable story products they can. And it's really only in hindsight when you look at the body of work that you go, that's revolutionary. That's big. Yeah. And if you even look at some of the things that we talk about at all the conferences, right? The Red Bulls, the Kraft, the HubSpots, all these sort of like, wow, that's the quintessential content story right there. Yeah. None of them were overnight successes. All of them had multiple failures and multiple small things going for years before they sort of became recognized as the revolutionaries that they were. And that's sort of what's on my mind.
Yeah, that's like, you hear that about bands, don't you? Where they're described as an overnight success, where they've been sort of touring and gigging and sleeping in vans for years before they got that sudden, they suddenly found a bigger audience. And that's the sort of thing that we content creators need to do, right? Is spend those years sleeping in the van and building up to, building our act, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's and the funny thing is that, and this is the thing that we talked about a little bit, that Joe and I talked about on our podcast, was how little patience business has for that these days, right? Yeah. In other words, we're so short-term focused. Yeah. In so many ways, and much of this has to do with quarterly performance or half-year performance or even yearly performance, that it's really hard to invest in something that we know isn't going to pay off in a quarter, right? Yeah. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. We were just working with a big company that is, Fortune 500 company. So they're a public company, and they have to do quarterly, announcements. Yeah. And they're doing something that is truly transformational. They're building an in-house agency, and the in-house and driven by content, right? So powered by content, this in-house agency is going to completely transform the way that all of their brands, they're a house of brands, does content, e-commerce, build community, and do owned media. And it's a multi-million-dollar investment, hiring hundreds of people over the course of, multiple years. And what is slowing the project is that they find it hard to make a business case that will show to the public markets that they're investing in something that isn't completely upsetting their profitability in any one quarter. And of course, this kind of investment, this transformation is something that will take multiple quarters, if not, multiple years. And the difficulty in making a project like this work isn't doing the work. It's actually doing the work at a cadence that doesn't upset the quarterly results.
Yeah.
And that's a shame, right? Because at a much smaller level, when we do these big projects, these big ideas, we have to do them in such a way that doesn't upset, all of the results that we're doing. It's almost like, can we be innovation? Can we be innovative? Well, yeah, go ahead and be innovative, as long as it doesn't break anything. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, that's a challenge, isn't it? So what advice do you give when people are in that situation? I mean, do you need to, I guess you demonstrate the small wins, right? Or how do you move forward with something like that?
One step at a time, right? I mean, the lesson for me when I look at it, and it was this, what dawned on me was, is that when you look at sort of the media companies, I think of Marvel, right? Mm-hmm. And how Marvel, has gone from being, let's be honest, in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, if you weren't a comic book geek, you didn't really understand what Marvel did. You didn't really know who Iron Man was. You didn't really know who Thor was. You didn't really, like people like my wife and people who weren't comic book fans, they didn't really understand that whole universe.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that as they've started to build, slowly a step-by-step big universe of characters and created so much value in what they did, they had the patience to do it slowly over time, develop those things, bring it to a wider audience, use the movies to be able to do that. And to me, that's just so much focus on the work instead of just trying to exploit something in a wide way, that it's so much more valuable today than it would have been if they had done the latter there, right? If they had just tried to exploit it for one thing. And when I see the difference between how Disney and Marvel have created value, and you look at it in comparison to, just in direct comparison to the way that Warner Brothers has treated the DC properties, it's just a stark difference, right? Yeah. I mean, forgive the pun, but that's it's interesting to me. So do the work. Do the work is the lesson.
Is the message. That's excellent. And so that's we're up to time. What's where can people find other thoughts such as this from you, Mr. Rose?
Well, I hear there's this podcast called CMO Rockstar or something like that.
But you did also mention the
but here's the thing: you talk about somebody who's doing the work. You, my friend, are doing the work. And so, where our little hole on the web is contentadvisory.net, which is where we do all of our, wonderful work with our clients and espouse ideas like this and debate the intellectual prowess of DC versus Marvel.
And also, I should mention, because you did mention that you do the podcast with Joe Polizzi, This Old Marketing, which I'm quite very happy to promote and distract our listeners with. And
it's our wonderful, it's literally just two knuckleheads talking about, these days a lot of NFTs and media companies and social audio and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, another NFT rant this week. Anyway,
increasingly, it's basically, the two old guys from the Muppets arguing about, about the future of cryptocurrency. But, that's yet another story.
All right. And when they spin the dial on the interwebs and they want to actually hear from you, where would they find you?
You can find me online on Twitter at Robert_Rose and on LinkedIn, wherever you find your LinkedIn things.
Splendid. Thank you very much, sir. And will I see you in the bar next week?
You will, of course, indeed.
I look forward to it. Thanks, mate. Thank you, Robert. Excellent advice. Going good to great takes time, and we need to put in the work. So that's a wrap on episode 61 of the Rockstar CMO effing marketing podcast. Thanks again to David, Margot, and Robert. I really appreciate their time. So please check out the show notes, click their links, follow them, and take a look at their work. You can find the show notes at rockstarcmo.fm, where you can also find all our previous episodes. But most of all, thank you for dropping a dime into your podcasting jukebox, selecting our track, and jiving along with us. Does the world need another effing marketing podcast? Let me know what you think. Please leave a rating, review, and subscribe. Or just keep listening. I'm glad you're here. Next week, Jeff is back. I'm chatting to Darren Guanaccia, Senior Vice President of Product at Hootsuite. And again, I'll join Robert Rose in our virtual Rockstar CMO bar. Until then, I've been your host, Ian Truscott, and I hope you'll again join us next week here at Rockstar CMO FM.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the boys' club of advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.